Welcome to everyone joining us, all of you, for this course on self-knowledge. Today we will be very warmly studying together conference number 7, titled Spiritual Protections. Belilin, Magic Circle, Jupiter, and Pentalpha. The purpose of discussing this topic is for us to learn about some helpful tools to better protect ourselves. Because on this path toward awakening our consciousness, we are going to experience some attacks. And therefore, divinity provides us with the opportunity to have some truly valuable and important tools for defense in our lives. It is important for us to know that these tools we are going to study are absolutely not meant for attacking, they are simply for defending ourselves. When we begin to carefully study these important topics, we will soon realize that there will inevitably be some negative forces, psychological forces that will try to prevent us from doing this spiritual work. And we will also at times encounter some external forces that certain people refer to as the so-called Black Lodge. These mysterious entities or forces are absolutely not interested in anyone awakening their consciousness, and they will actively oppose it whenever we set out to do the important work of awakening. That is the reason why we are given certain tools for protection, the well-known spiritual protections for our own safety and well-being. Spiritual protection means solving something through the power of the word, which refers to using spoken or written affirmations and intentions. In this case, we are going to use the power of our word through conscious speech and positive declarations to be able to avoid these negative attacks that will try to hinder or block our spiritual development and growth. That is why, in this lesson, we are going to carefully study and learn about some important protections. We are going to study a chant called the Belilin chant, which will help us drive away negative energies from the environment. Let's study that a bit. We are going to talk about a magic circle, which is, in other words, essentially an energetic barrier, so that negative forces or energies cannot enter the area where we are. Then we are going to study the protection of Jupiter. This will help us to better protect ourselves from direct attacks. In just a moment, we will carefully study what kinds of direct attacks we might possibly suffer, and we will also take a closer look at the Pentalpha, which is a powerful protection that will help us stay protected at all times, in daily life, in our everyday routines. So based on this brief explanation, let's begin to study about the Belilin. Ready? What is this? About Belilin? Belilin is a special chant that a master or an angel once taught to Master Samael. It is a chant to drive away negative energies from the environment. As you can see here in this graphic, you will find the verses showing how this Belilin should be sung. First, I am going to chant it, and then I will explain what it is useful for and what each of these steps means. The correct intonation is as follows. Wafte, Belilin, 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 Amphora of salvation, I would like to be with you. Materialism has no strength with me. Pa, Belilin, Belilin, Belilin. And then it is repeated a second time. Belilin, 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 Amphora of salvation, I would like to be with you. Materialism has no strength with me. Belilin, 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 Belilin. And it is repeated a third time. Belilin, Belilin, Belilin. Amphora of salvation, I would like to be with you. Materialism has no strength with me. Belilin, Belilin, Belilin. Materialism has no power next to me. Belilin, Belilin, Belilin. What does it do, this chant? Este canto, cuando se pronuncia, crea una vibración en el espacio que nos rodea. Esta vibración ayuda a eliminar las energías negativas del lugar en el que nos encontramos. If, for example, we are in a place and we want to meditate, for instance, in our room, and suddenly we feel a heaviness in that place, then this chant will drive away that heaviness. All right? It will also help us protect ourselves if we see that there is a force that suddenly comes to harm us. For example, if we suddenly become victims of a robbery or a dangerous situation, by singing the Belilin, negative energies will be driven away, and even the psychology of the other people will calm down. So, that is the first chant. It is a chant to drive away negative energies. Now, let's take a moment to carefully study a little bit more in detail together. More specifically, what does each of these paragraphs mean? Let's talk first about what is the Belilin. Well, Belilin is actually a word that is made up of two separate phrases. In this case, Bel means tower, and Lin means fire. In this case, we are specifically referring to the Tower of Fire. The Tower of Fire represents our head, and the body of the tower is our spinal column. That is why when we say Belilin, we are referring to the fact that the fire of sexual energy, which is also known as the fire of the Kundalini, ascends up to our head. That is why it is chanted 3 times, once for the Father, once for the Son, and once for the Holy Spirit. Amphora of salvation. The amphora is a container vessel in which water is stored. In this case, for example, we are going to say that the amphora is our head, in which the water that we are transforming is being stored. We can, in fact, also understand and see the amphora as the sexual center where the energy that will be transformed for our salvation is stored, in a sense. That is why there is this phrase, amphora of salvation. I would like to be with you. This means that we do not want to spill that sexual energy, that we want the energy to always remain in our heads. Materialism has no power next to me, meaning that the external forces that cause the energy to leave the body, the sensations of pleasure and suffering, have no power over our inner consciousness. And finally, it is repeated again, Belilin, Belilin, Belilin. That is the explanation of the mantric chant. If you do it correctly, focusing on your spinal column and on each of these words, you will notice how energetically the place where you are becomes calmer and lighter. That is the chant of Belilin. Now let's talk about the second one just briefly. The second, energetic protection, which is known as the magic circle. After we drive away the energies through the Belilin, it is now necessary for us to learn how to properly close ourselves off and protect our personal space so that those negative energies do not return or find their way back into the place where we are staying. Therefore, it is necessary for us to learn how to make the magic circle. This magic circle will be carefully drawn by a specific part of our consciousness, which is known as the elemental intercessor. This elemental intercessor is also commonly known as the famous, well-respected, and revered guardian angel. It is a part of God responsible for our own protection. Therefore, it is recommended that before going to bed to rest, we always perform the Belilin and always make the magic circle so that we are not disturbed during the night. This energetic closure also effectively prevents what is commonly referred to as sleep paralysis in the body itself. It can also help prevent nocturnal emissions, which is a topic we will discuss later. This elemental intercessor, or this guardian angel, is in particular a very powerful part of God that currently does not pay attention to us. That is why, to invoke it, you must ask the Father to call the angel. And that is why we are going to perform the protection in the following way. Spiritual protection is done as follows. With reverence, we are going to say, My Heavenly Father, my Lord, and my God, I beg you, if it is your will, order my elemental intercessor to leave my body and gently draw a powerful and protective magical circle of protection around my room, around my bed, around my house, around this vehicle, well, really, wherever we want to make the magical circle, anywhere at all, in every possible place we can think of, to make it completely free from the forces of evil. And at that moment, we are simply going to put ourselves in the position of being the being, of being the consciousness, and we are going to give the order to the elemental intercessor. We are going to say, elemental intercessor, elemental intercessor, elemental intercessor, work in the name of the Christ, by the power of the Christ, and by the majesty of the Christ. At that moment, we are going to imagine that from our spinal column, our guardian angel, that elemental intercessor emerges, stands in front of us, and begins to draw a circle of green fire while we pronounce the mantra S. Then we begin to pronounce it once, twice, 3 times. With the power of our imagination, we are going to draw this magic circle. It is important that through imagination, we then visualize that this fire or this circle also extends upward, and it protects us almost as if we were inside a dome or a bubble. Once we have made this magic circle, the elemental intercessor will not allow any negative force to enter the space. That is why it is important that whenever we are going to lie down, to rest, to sleep, we perform the Belilin and then the magic circle. In the same way, if we are going to do a meditation practice, a practice of higher sex, an astral travel practice, in short, any of the tools we teach, it is good to always make our magic circle. Finally, it is good to know that this magic circle will be broken the moment we leave the place that we have traced through our imagination. If, for example, I made the magic circle through my imagination around my room, the moment I leave the room, the magic circle will be broken. If someone, for instance, enters the magic circle or the room where I made the magic circle is not broken. On the contrary, that person enters and begins to be protected by my magic circle. But if that person leaves the magic circle, in this case, they break the magic circle and would also break the protection for each of us. That is the magic circle. It is truly very interesting to see through astral travel how that circle of fire is formed on the astral or internal level. It is a very, very powerful circle. Now let's study the other protection, which is the protection of Jupiter. This Jupiter protection is in fact very powerful. Let's talk a little about it. This is a protection that will help us when we have or experience or suffer from direct attacks. And we will find 2 types of direct attacks. We will encounter direct attacks, such as those that can be seen through astral projection, or also direct attacks here on the physical plane. For example, a direct attack in astral projection can occur when we consciously go out into the astral world, call upon a master, or invoke our spiritual guide or our divine mother, and then an impostor appears, or someone shows up pretending to be our divine being. There is a way for us to discern whether the entity we are speaking with is truly our own being, or is part of the White Lodge, or on the contrary is actually an impostor, a black magician, or a psychological defect that simply wants to give us a false oracle, in other words, a misleading message. So we can use this protection of Jupiter to defend ourselves, in particular from that kind of deception that we may encounter in the world of dreams in our lives. Also, in the world of dreams, we will often find ourselves being attacked by psychological defects or by some black magicians who try to harm us. But with this protection, we will be able to defend ourselves from any direct attack by defects or dark entities. Likewise, we will also be able to protect ourselves from direct attacks in the physical plane. If, for example, someone comes to rob us or to physically harm us in any way at that very moment, we could use this spiritual protection. This spiritual protection will drive away the psychological aggregate. If, for example, the person comes to rob us, it drives away the thief I from the person's psyche, and as a result, the person would not rob us. If someone comes to attack us, then it would conjure or drive away the defect of anger from that person. So, we are going to study how this protection is performed, and then we will explain what each of these words means. The first thing is that we have to place our left hand, as you see here, covering our abdomen. The solar plexus, the area around the navel, and the left side where the abdomen is located. So we're going to simply cover this part of our body here, and with the right hand, we're going to make this lock. We are going to place the fingers like this. We are going to carefully place the thumb here. The index finger and the middle finger we are going to keep raised, and these two we are going to keep closed. This is the gesture. Ready? So once you have that position, we're going to say the following sentence. We're going to say, in the name of Jupiter, father of the gods, I conjure you defect, I Tevigos Koslim. And now at this point, we imagine that from the fingers, a lightning bolt comes out. This is repeated 2 more times. In the name of Jupiter, father of the gods, I conjure you defect, I Tevigos Koslim. In the name of Jupiter, father of the gods, I conjure you defect, I Tevigos Koslim. If we are in the astral plane, these 3 conjurations will be that the entity that comes to attack us, or the impostor that suddenly is impersonating our being, or by some master is going to run away. Many times it will explode, and at that moment we will truly realize how this protection is going to defend us. If we use this protection, for example, on our inner guide or on a master, this protection will not affect them in any way at all. In the case that someone externally comes to attack us or harm us, when we use the protection of Jupiter, this person who is coming to attack us will simply calm down psychologically in a peaceful manner. And we will notice how that defect is calmed, and we will be able to get out of that situation unscathed. Now, speaking about how exactly the protection is performed in practice, let's take a closer look and study in detail a bit more about what this protection actually means. Alright, in the name of Jupiter, Jupiter, which is often regarded as a symbol of wisdom and expansion, represents the higher emotional center. This higher emotional center is related to love. In particular, it is what allows us to self-observe, and it also governs balance. It manages the balance almost as if our eyes were a finely tuned scale. The left side, as you can see, represents mercy, and the right side represents justice. So when we say in the name of Jupiter, we are making an allegory that the father of all the gods, who is justice, who is this higher emotional center, is based on mercy and justice. Remember that mercy is above all mercy toward humanity, the forgiveness and compassion we must have for others, and justice, which would be considered the right side. It represents justice toward our own psychological defects. That is why, when we say, in the name of Jupiter, father of all the gods, it is indeed an allegory that all the gods have had to possess justice, eliminate their defects, and show mercy and help to humanity. When we say, I conjure you, that is to say, an allegory to the psychological I, the psychological defect. In psychological terms, it does not refer to us in the first person, but rather to the defect of laziness, the defect of anger, the psychological aggregate. I conjure you now in this moment, and then comes this mantric word which means Tevigos Koslim. This word is a word that is related to the power of energy, sexual creative energy. Te, vigos. V means feminine energy. Gos is positive energy. The S is the fire by which they are united. And kos is the union of these two energies. And slim is the result of this powerful union indeed. So when we say te vigos koslim, it is simply the union of the negative or feminine force with the positive force, and the creation that results from this union. That is why, at the very moment we recite this phrase, we should imagine a ray, a powerful force of energy, that will repel whatever it is we are attacking. It is a truly very powerful form of spiritual protection, extremely valuable, that we should use in our daily lives. For example, if we are about to be attacked by an animal, like a dog or a wild beast, we can use this protection, and it will help us come out safely and securely from these situations. Now, to wrap up our discussion, let's take a closer look at the Pentalpha. The Pentalpha is a form of spiritual protection that will help us to safeguard ourselves in our daily life. As I was saying, the magic circle will protect us for our safety when we are in a stationary location. For example, when we are at home, or for instance, when we are in our meditation room and we are not going to leave, that circle will protect us. But, when we sometimes have to go out, well, for example, to the park, or we have to go to work, it's great to have dependable protection in our daily life, which is like carrying an invisible magic circle around us so that it protects us. The Pentalpha is a star with 5 distinct points, with the main point facing upward, which should not be confused with the inverted Pentalpha that is often used by certain satanic schools in various contexts. The true Pentalpha has the head pointing upward, as you can see here in the diagram. And we are going to use this Pentalpha. We are going to learn how to invoke or conjure it through certain mantras. The mantras that we are going to use to conjure it are as follows. We are going to pronounce, ready, Klim Krishnaya Govindaya Gopihana Vayabhaya Swaha. Those are the specific mantras, and we will need to carefully combine them together with some movements in order to activate this protection. So let's take a look at exactly what these movements are. So let's carefully spread our hands, just as you can see here in the diagram, and in a moment we're going to pronounce Klim. Then, with our hands raised above the head, we will slowly and clearly pronounce Krishnaya. Next, while gently touching the head, we will say Govindaya. Then, we will place our hands on the shoulders, as you might see here, and we will once again pronounce Govindaya. Next, we will slowly and gently lower our hands and then pronounce the word or phrase clearly, Vaya Vaya. And finally, let's finish with the last movement, which is Swaja, the right hand over the left. We can see, for example, in this small diagram how the exercise is done. So there we will pronounce Klim, Krishnaya, Govindaya, Gopijana, Vaya Vaya, Swaja. Alright, we can do it with our hands here, or we can also close with our hands placed gently on the chest. But remember, the right hand should always be positioned over the left. This means that willpower must always, without exception, dominate imagination. So let's remember how it goes. So with our hands extended, Klim, then reaching up over our head, Krishnaya, gently touching the head, Govindaya, Gopihana, Vaya, Vaya, Susha or Swaha, performed with the hands gently placed over the chest. So this form of spiritual protection will, in fact, immediately protect us in our daily life if we are actively working on psychological death. This protection will shield us from dangers, theft, and recurrences. Energetically, it will allow us to remain closed off. But it is important that we are practicing the 3 factors and that we are not doing improper things. So, these are the tools that the Masters shared with us so that we can protect ourselves from the attacks of the Black Lodge. Let me remind you, Belilin will drive away negative energies from the environment. The magic circle will prevent negative energies from entering the place where we are. The spiritual protection of Jupiter will help us in daily life to protect us from direct attacks, and the Pentalpha for our protection. It will help us to remain closed off and protected during the various activities of daily life. Thank you, each and every one of you, very much for joining us. Remember, practice makes perfect. This is a talk that we will need to be practicing consistently every day in the process of awakening our own consciousness. I just want to remind you of our contact information in case you want to leave us any questions or concerns about these topics. The next topic we will study will be the upcoming conference on evolution, involution, and revolution, so please stay tuned for these very important conferences. We sincerely appreciate your participation. Thank you all very much for joining us for this conference. Take care. See you soon.